Let's dive right into this explainer. Think about how often you try to guess what's coming next. I mean, from where to put your personal investments, all the way to global politics. Predicting the future is something we all attempt, right? But very few of us actually master it. Well, today we're doing a book summary review of Philip Tetlock and Dan Gardner's brilliant book, Superforecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction. It's basically considered the absolute gold standard for understanding how to get predictions right. We're going to break down their incredible research and look at the exact specific techniques that the best forecasters in the world use to actually pull this off.
$50 billion. That's not just a big number. That is the estimated annual budget spent globally just on forecasting. That massive amount of money is poured into predicting all sorts of things every single year. In their research, Tetlock and Gardner highlight this incredibly wide spectrum of forecasting. We're talking about mundane, everyday stuff, like tomorrow's weather, all the way up to massive, civilization-altering questions, like, is a huge global war going to break out in the next 15 years? The stakes are literally as high as they get, which is exactly why understanding how experts manage to predict these things successfully is just so vital for us.
To make sense of all this, we've structured this book's summary review into a 5-lesson masterclass. We'll cover the information rule, break it down, specificity, the probability illusion, and finally, the superforecaster mindset.
Let's kick things off with Lesson 1, the information rule, starting with Enrico Fermi's famous atomic experiment.
So, picture this. Enrico Fermi was this legendary physicist, and he remarkably estimated the strength of the very first atomic bomb blast. But here's the crazy part. He didn't do it by waiting for official readings from a bunch of complex, slow-moving scientific instruments. Nope. Instead, he simply dropped pieces of paper from his hand during the blast and carefully measured exactly how far the shockwave blew them. Using just that immediate, real-time data, he calculated a highly accurate estimate of the bomb's yield. This is a brilliant story because it perfectly illustrates our first rule, which hinges on the idea of a deterministic future. The core principle goes like this. If we could somehow know where every single particle in the universe is right now, and we knew its exact motion, we could perfectly predict the future. Now, obviously, we can't know the state of every particle, but the big takeaway the authors emphasize is that superforecasters aggressively hunt for current information. They know absolutely for sure that the more data we have about right now, the better we can predict tomorrow. The present dictates the future.
Moving right along to Lesson 2, Break It Down, which brings us to the famous Chicago piano tuner problem. Fermi actually taught his students this really clever technique, often called Fermiizing. It allowed them to predict seemingly impossible numbers. He'd ask them something wild, like, how many piano tuners are there in the entire city of Chicago? Now, initially, that sounds completely unknowable. But instead of just panicking and wildly guessing a massive number, the trick is to find the psychological relief of breaking the problem down. You turn it into smaller, knowable, researchable questions. It's like a giant puzzle. First, what's the total number of pianos in Chicago? Second, how often are those pianos tuned every year? Third, how long does it take to tune one single piano? And fourth, how many hours a year does an average piano tuner work? If you figure out the answers to just those 4 bite-sized questions, you can deduce a highly accurate prediction. In this specific case, it comes out to roughly 63 piano tuners. So the rule of thumb here is simple. Always, always break massive questions down into smaller, solvable pieces.
All right, Lesson 3, Specificity, or why vague forecasts almost always fail.
The authors highlight this spectacularly wrong prediction by Steve Ballmer, the former CEO of Microsoft, talking about the original iPhone. Back in the day, he confidently went on record and stated, "There's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance." Well, as we all know today, he missed the mark completely. But beyond just being incredibly wrong, there's a delicious irony to this. His absolute unwavering certainty, saying no chance, that is the exact opposite of how a superforecaster thinks. Plus, this quote is just a perfect example of the sheer danger of using vague language when you're trying to forecast something. Let's look closer. The fundamental problem is that he just wasn't clear at all. When he says significant, what does that actually mean? Are we talking about above 20%, above 50%? And what exact market is he even talking about? Is it the US market share or the global market share for all cell phones? Because it's completely unspecific, it's virtually useless as a forecast. Tetlock's research actually proves that everyday TV pundits love using vague words like significant, likely, or fairly possible. Why? Because they use them as a shield so they can never be proven wrong later. Superforecasters don't play that game. They assign hard, specific numbers. They force accountability on themselves. The major lesson here? When you forecast, you have got to be as utterly specific as possible.
That brings us to Lesson 4, the probability illusion, featuring a really fascinating coin flip experiment.
This lesson reveals how our human brains wildly misunderstand probability. Tetlock and Gardner shared this awesome story of a clever teacher who gave his students a very specific homework assignment. He basically split the class right down the middle. He told the first half to actually flip a coin, heads or tails, 200 times and physically write down the results. He told the second group not to flip a coin, but to just fake it and write down a completely random pattern of heads and tails. Well, when they turned the papers in the very next day, the teacher could immediately sort them into two piles and spot the cheating students who just made up the patterns. How on earth did he do it so fast?
He just looked for the streaks. Tetlock and Gardner highlight this major cognitive trap. You see, humans are naturally pattern-seeking machines. We mistakenly think that a random, even chance means we shouldn't see more than 3 heads or 3 tails in a row. We just expect this nice, even, alternating distribution. Because of that, the cheaters avoided putting 5 heads or 5 tails in a row because it just didn't feel random enough to them. But in reality, true probability is clumpy, it's messy, and it creates massive streaks. Over 200 flips, the chances of getting at least 4 or 5 heads or tails in a row are actually enormous. If a paper didn't have any groups of 5 in a row, the teacher knew for a fact they faked it. We really have to be deeply aware of our brain's flawed intuition when we're dealing with true probability.
Finally, we reach Lesson 5, the superforecaster mindset. What are the actual traits of these elite predictors?
Now, you might be thinking you need to be a certified literal genius to predict the future. But the authors discovered something so fascinating during their massive forecasting tournaments. It turns out someone with an astronomical IQ of 170 is actually only a tiny bit better at predicting things than someone of average intelligence who just regularly reads the New York Times. Raw intelligence adds very little to your actual prediction skills, compared to simply taking in vast amounts of information and staying well informed.
So the crucial point the authors are making here is all about the knowledge curve. Gathering huge amounts of knowledge only yields slightly better predictions over time. You hit diminishing returns. And honestly, even with all the knowledge in the world, reality is just infinitely complex. There will always be completely unpredictable factors. I mean, as the book humorously notes, a black hole could literally just randomly swallow the universe tomorrow. Because absolute certainty is completely impossible, you have to adopt a highly specific mindset to navigate the unknown.
Elite superforecasters all share these core traits. They're naturally cautious and humble, deeply understanding that nothing is certain. They're actively open-minded, totally comfortable with numbers, and deeply self-critical, constantly watching their own backs for cognitive traps like the anchoring bias. But the real flagship takeaway of this book summary is that they are thoughtful updaters. These people treat forecasting exactly like updating software on a phone. Every single time a new piece of news drops, they willingly tweak their probability up or down just a few percentage points. When the facts change, they change their minds. No ego involved. Plus, they maintain a serious growth mindset, truly believing it is possible to get better at this through practice.
Oh, and to be a super forecaster, you must also possess grit. We're talking about the sheer determination to keep at your predictions no matter how long it takes. Some forecasts are incredibly long-term. You might literally have to wait up to 50 years to see the actual consequences of a forecast play out in reality. But why does this matter for you? Because keeping score of your own predictions over months or even years is quite frankly the only way to actually improve. It takes serious patience and resilience to honestly track your own accuracy over time.
So as we wrap up this explainer, and you take these lessons from Tetlock and Gardner's research out into your own life, I want to leave you with one final critical thought. Ask yourself honestly about your own open-mindedness. Are your beliefs treasures to be fiercely protected, or are they hypotheses to be tested? Because if you can start treating your beliefs as the latter, you are well on your way to becoming a super forecaster.